Hello there. Sorry to get my yucks in for this video because it's not going to be a very yucky video. So I want to state very clearly before we get started what I'm doing here and what I'm not doing. Here's what I'm not doing. So you might have noticed in the past that I released quite a many, much too much Star Wars videos. And in those videos I was expressing my extreme unhappiness with Lucasfilms. I'll leave it at that. So it became really clear to me in these videos that releasing 2 to 3 hours a week of screaming rants about movies based on space wizards was kind of counteractive to my goal of building $100 to $200 million companies. Now, while I'm still quite unhappy with Star Wars, I've let that go because it's an extreme distraction to my focus, and I've moved on and taken the videos down. So they're staying down, and threats like threatening to graffiti my house for abandoning my moral compass, some guy actually left that in the comments section, are not going to influence that decision, because let's just move on. So why am I making a video about Star Wars and Lucasfilms then? Well, this is a business channel, and one of the greatest ways to obtain really good business lessons is by not watching companies that have succeeded. It's really hard to find the lessons in those companies a lot of times. It's by finding businesses that have colossally messed up, and then isolating why they've colossally messed up, and then not doing those things. And if you don't do those things, you can actually go out there and build businesses that are very successful. And you can also construct your life in a way that becoming successful becomes very easy. Now, in the past decade, I struggle to find any company that is as publicly as possible committed business seppuku like Lucasfilms has. They have gone on the grandest of stages and shit the bed in the grandest of ways. And in this video, I want to talk about why they did this. What is the source of this? Why did these decisions get made? And what is wrong with Lucasfilms is their base code. It's their foundation. And if you don't have a base code and a foundation in your life and in your business, you're going to end up like a mini Lucasfilms. Now, there's plenty of businesses that have messed up in the past decade, but there's none that have done it on such a grand stage that we can all relate to. So what I want to do in this video is talk about why this happened, how it happened, and how in God's name to avoid this in your business and your personal life. So let's discuss. So here's a chart. Lucasfilms has not done a good job the past few years. Star Wars is a franchise of movies that should not make less than $1 billion per movie, and it should definitely be going in an upward trend. It's the most successful movie franchise of all time. That's undebatable. The fact that the movies are losing money now is undebatable. The fact that their toy sales have gone to absolute rubbish is undebatable. The fact that their video games have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way is undebatable. You can talk about how much you like the movies or whatever. This isn't what the video is about. It's about very, very, very poor decisions that have led to these outcomes. And how the hell were these decisions made? Because for Star Wars to go down this route, to go from one of the most successful movie toy companies, one of the most profitable companies movie-wise, and one of the most profitable video game companies, to this is a feat of strength. This is out of control. And if you don't understand how this happened, you're going to make these same mistakes in your life. And it's going to take me a few minutes to make the point here. And if you can't take a few minutes to understand the point I'm trying to make, you literally lack the qualities that are going to be needed to avoid this in your own life and your own business. So give me a sec. Check this out, because this is a curious case of Benjamin Button as far as businesses go. Because what Lucasfilms managed to do is the equivalent to starting a game of Monopoly. Have you ever played Monopoly and you know when you open up and you have all the cash, you have the entire drawer of cash and all the money that's in the box, and you think for a moment, what if I just took all that money and put it underneath my side of the board and then played the game like that? It crosses your mind for a second as you're placing your little dog down on the board. And so what Lucasfilms did is the equivalent to starting the game with all the money in the box and then ending up with $10 and only the little purple spots left. Everything has gone to heck, and I racked my brain over this. How does this happen? And there's so many simple answers. Oh, they're SJWs. Oh, they're playing identity politics. There's all these things. That's not really the case. That is the outcome. That's the outcome of what happened. And we can debate all sorts of cultural reasons why they failed and being mean to fans. We can debate those things all day, but how did those things end up happening in the first place? And what happened is because you need to understand this. People as well as companies are really just a source of base code. What do I mean by base code? Every decision you make or every decision your company makes goes back to a central code. What do you do? What do you not do? What are your values? What are the things you think are important? What are the things you don't think are important? What are the things you will always do? What are the things you will never do? And you've probably noticed people in life that don't have a base code. They have no principles. They have no values. And I'm not coming from a moral standpoint here, like people that don't have values need to get values and a moral no, I'm not saying this at all. I'm saying people that don't have a base code are a clusterfuck of a person. They can't make decisions. They're going off all over the place. They are focused on 10 different things. They constantly contradict themselves. They're massive hypocrites. And it's so hard for them to get to point A to point B because what's happening in their life, let me make sure I'm totally covering up with my face right there. In order for them to get to point A to point B, or really to get to point A to point B in your life, you have to move in a straight line. You have to make consistent decisions to get to a consistent place. That's just how things work. And when you have a person that has no base code, or their base code is a complete mess of contradicting everything, what happens is they end up all over the place. And this is why you see people that never accomplish anything in their life, or when they do accomplish anything, it goes to rubbish very quickly because there's no straight and narrow. There's no consistent place where we're going to end up at. And when you have a company, this is magnified on the grandest of scales, because look, you can have one person who has the brain of a crazy homeless person and they can still kind of get their stuff together and move in a straight direction. They can kind of make consistent directions. Now, when you multiply this by 10, 100, 1,000 people in the case of Lucasfilms, I'm not sure of their absolute amount of people that work on their staff. This goes absolutely hamwire, because if you have 100 people, all with 100 different values and principles, and what's important and what's not important, and the company doesn't have a clear why and a clear goal, what happens is you have this company with this base code that makes absolutely no sense. Imagine if you could turn a company into a set of if-nots, or if and if-not sets, like in code. For example, when something's coded, how it works is, if it's this, then do this. If it's not, then do this. And if a company has a bunch of if-nots that are all conflicting with each other, it's just like, let's imagine this is the destination they're trying to get at, like making a good movie, or making great toys, or making a lot of money, or something. They just end up, the if-nots just take them to, like, the moon. And that's where Lucasfilm has ended up at. They've ended up on the moon when they were trying to get to, like, Florida. And nobody knows how they got there. Rick and Morty reference. How did they get there? So, what is this base code? What makes up the base code of a company? It's, for lack of better words, their culture. But if we want to put this in 3 key areas, it's why the company exists, it's the company's values, and it's the culture of the employees. And if a company doesn't have this figured out, your company is going to be a disaster. If you don't have this figured out in your own life, you don't have a culture for yourself, you're going to be a disaster. Trust me. I've operated with like a screwy, hypocritical culture in my own head, kept me stuck for years and years and years. Kept me doing all sorts of things that didn't make any sense to me. And I had to go back and analyze and have like a big old breakdown of my life. You don't want to do it. Just get this right the first time. Because when you don't have this, you can't move in a straight line. And so, what are these things? What are these things? Let me explain how I run this at my company. And this will make a bit more sense. Because this right here is the base code of my company, and I have a very similar base code in my actual life. And without these base codes, what happens is you don't have values, and so you make decisions that don't contribute to where you want to go. And you do things that hurt where you want to go, and then you don't do things that will move you where you want to go. And if you don't have these clearly outlined, you're going to end up on the moon instead of going to Florida, or wherever the heck Lucasfilm wanted to go. So look, at Market Hero, there's 3 things we talked about. We talked about the why, we talked about the values, we talked about the culture. This is all summed up in this one slide right here. In fact, I have a giant culture deck that works as like a base code for how every single employee and every single decision is supposed to be made. Because you can't control 30 people at once. You just can't. You can't go and be like, all right, all 30 of you make the right decision all the time. You need to have something that works as the base code. And so Market Hero, why does it exist? It's because it's tough for digital marketers to get accurate sales data on their businesses to act upon. By the way, just citing my sources, I copied this slide literally from Sam Ovens' company because I thought it was a really good idea. So go check out his video on planning or something. I think that's what it's called. Anyways, the mission: invent technology to make it simple for digital marketers to see the correct data behind a business and perform data-driven changes to reach their conversion goals. Now that probably seems really boring to you, but this is why we exist. This is what we do. This is what we do. And so in the past, because I didn't have a why, I'd be like making like hoodies and I'd be making Star Wars videos. And then I was like, I wrote this out and I'm like, how does making these hoodies have to do with this? How does making another course have to do anything with this? How does running an Instagram have to do anything with this? By the way, I stopped making YouTube videos as much, and Instagram literally doubled our sales on our ads and doubled the amount of active users at Market Hero. By knowing your whys, and literally doubled the active users at Market Hero. Let's continue. That's our why. Then we have our values right here. I'm just going to read through a few of them right here. Spartan Wall. All right, the team takes care of itself first. Okay, we have values like less is more. We want to make everything as simple when it comes to tracking. That's what we want to do. We want to make it as simple for digital marketers to see the correct data behind their business. Okay, we want unfiltered, brutal truth because I don't want anyone in the company, their rank, whatever they're doing, to hold back something. And you can see how these 10 things right here really cover almost every decision and action. And let's bring this back to Lucasfilms because it's brutally clear that they had none of this. They had none of this, and you can tell this by their actions and their decisions as a company, and this is exactly why they ended up on the moon. This is how they lost the game with all the money in the Monopoly board. So let's look at it. Why does Lucasfilms exist? Now, you would think it's to make the best Star Wars movies possible. And if this why, if they had that why clearly planned out, what they would do is to make the most money. There could be a few different whys: to make the best Star Wars movie possible, or to make as much money as possible. If they were trying to make as much money as possible, the best why would have been to research exactly what the fans would buy and what they would look into. So, for example, in The Last Jedi, they destroyed the statistically favorite character of every single person. Complete mess. And if you were looking at their why right there, to make as much money as possible, already contradicted if they were going for the most money as possible. But then if they were trying to make the best franchise and make fans as happy as possible, then what was going on right there is they didn't do that either. Because if you look at their video games, they made all sorts of money grabs. They made all sorts of money grab decisions right there. So many. So there wasn't a value right there lined up. But then maybe it could have been to promote identity politics and change the world culturally with Star Wars. They did a very bad job of that because then they keep going back to the old Star Wars and trying to use old Star Wars fans as the funding source. And then it could have been to make a really great movie, but then they worried more about culture instead of defining characters, and so then the toy sales died off because no one was a fan of the characters. And then they could have been to honor the original franchise, but then they destroyed all the characters in the original franchise. So what you can see is they had like a mix of 5 different whys: make as much money as possible, push identity politics or culture, or affects things culturally. They could have been to make the best movie possible. They tried to do that, and then they tried to also respect the old movies by like bringing back other characters. And because all of them were contradictory to each other, they just ended up with a big pile of blah that made everyone mad. It made every single person mad. If you were in it culturally, there's things that made you mad. If you were in it to see your characters, there's things that made you mad. If you were there to see just a movie and enjoy it, it wasn't there because they weren't writing it. So their whys were all over the place. There was no consistent why. There was nothing for the whole entire company to get behind. You had some employees over here thinking about identity politics. You had other employees over here thinking about how to make the old movies. You had directors over here thinking about how to change the game and redefine Star Wars. That is exactly why it turned into such a mess, because there's no consistent thing. If they just gotten behind one thing, this would have happened. But then what were the values? What were the values of the company? What were the things they put before anything else? Almost everything they did gets counteracted by what they did. There's no set of values, and if they had values, they didn't adhere to them in any shape or form. And because of this, what happened is the employees at Lucasfilms, their source code is all over the place. You have some people like David Filoni, who like writes the Clone Wars. I think that's his name. I might have mispronounced it. And then you have Kathleen Kennedy, who's the head of it. and then you have Bob Iger, who's controlling Disney, and then you have J.J. Abrams, and then you have Rian Johnson, all with completely different values for the movies. Rian Johnson was the director, J.J. Abrams was the first director. They didn't even talk to each other on the scripts. They changed the scripts out. And you have Bob Iger right here, who's trying to launch Star Wars Park and make as much money as possible. Then you have Kathleen Kennedy, whose job right here is if you watch any of her interviews, her big priority was putting women first and identity politics, which could work in theory if the whole entire company was behind that, because then you could make a whole entire new fan base out of that, but you couldn't. And then you have people like Filoni and other people trying to honor the old franchise, trying to do that. And so what were the values? Was it fans first? No, it wasn't. Because the fans, you have some employees making fun of fans. You have some employees complimenting fans. You have some employees just trying to get as much money from fans as possible. Was it a team first? No, you have some parts of the company throwing each other in the bus. You have directors literally not working to each other. You have constantly directors getting fired and not working together. So it wasn't company first. And if you go back over, so if you look at some of my values of the company right here, I'm not saying I have the world's greatest value set. I think I do. But I'm not saying I have the world's greatest value set right here, but if you look at these things, everything around here makes sure to not counteract each other. So for example, if an employee is dealing with a hassling customer or a customer that's very mad, the first thing we got to remember is not pass our crap off to other employees. We got to take care of each other first. And so our engineers do this by making sure our code doesn't cause our support team problems. Support team does this by not trying to push every single code glitch problem to the engineers, and they try and fix it on their own. And then what we have is obsessive customer fandom. So when a customer is having problems, or a customer is just, heck, wants to have a chat with support, our support people are supposed to be there and almost be like groupies, like super interested in their business and stuff like that. These two things right here, if we have a support person who's going out there and then starts pushing problems to other support people and isn't like obsessed with the customer's business, boom, they're out of here, they're gone. You see how that works? It's like really simple. And then when we're making decisions right here, when we're thinking about features and design, everything's always going to be less is more. So if we can find systems and support to simplify everything, that's what we're going to go through. We're never going to make complicated systems, and we always think long term. So what we're going to see is when we're thinking about taking on a customer that could be really bad for the platform as a whole, we're not going to do that. So all these things you're going to see, all these like right here, they all end up working together. And one of the main things Lucasfilm lacked that every company should have is, I call this Eye of Mordor focus. You know, like in Lord of the Rings when it's watching Frodo. It's like watching it and never takes its eye off of it. We have that right here to remember this is what we focus on, and we focus on nothing else. And what was going on is these values at Lucasfilms were non-existent. They don't. You cannot find a consistent value or set of value that Lucasfilms always follows. Even if it's abiding the identity politics, which was main people's biggest gripe, they break that all the time too. Their set of values for every single one of these employees right here is wildly different. Wildly different values and sets of things they will do and never do. And because of that, you have this company that's going in 10 different ways, and it's making every single possible person mad. And it's not, so for example, they could have made like basic money grab values, like always focus on money first, and profit over everything else. And so you would have seen decisions like they made with EA Games, but you also would have seen movies that highly catered based on the consumer stats and what they would buy. And putting Luke Skywalker and Harrison Ford and Han Solo in a movie together, that's money stuff right there. Vader, biggest money mover right there. You know? And then and so they didn't. And then they maybe could have made like values like, okay, no, we always focus on respecting the old trilogy and the universe that Star Wars in. No, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They threw out everything before that, and then what they did is with like the video games and stuff like that, they went straight money grab with it. They could have made like Knights of the Old Republic 3 or all sorts of things that are proven success that fans absolutely love. They could have made old Republic movies. They could have done all sorts of stuff right there, but they didn't. And so they like tried to do a money grab, but then go back and also push identity politics at the same time, and then like at the same time try and go back to the old movies with the Han Solo movie, but while putting this stuff, it didn't make any sense. There's no value in this company that doesn't counteract itself. And if you have this in your life, for example, you see people all the time, they say, I want to be a really successful entrepreneur, but then they eat bad food and drink and have a cloudy brain. That's something I did for the longest time. Or they say they want to build a $100 million business, but then they build 3 businesses that they're working on at the same time. They don't have a main goal that they all focus on, so they end up like a counteractive person. That's what I did for a long time. Destroys everything. You end up like a mini Lucasfilm. And so then finally, the big thing right here that toppled all of this is the culture. Now, you can have any culture in your company. Lucasfilms could have been an entire, you know, socially driven culture. You know, they could have focused on politics only. And while that wouldn't have been good for movie sales, it would have at least drilled home and everyone would have gone behind it. They could have been a culture that was obsessed with the fans. There has to be a unifying cause. Let me explain what this means. So your job as an entrepreneur and a CEO is not to actually work in the business. Your job is to create a greenhouse and then put the proper people and then put the plants in the greenhouse that will contribute to each other's growth as best as possible. In order to do that, this isn't like building a nation. This isn't something for everybody. This isn't an everyone wins. You want to stack the deck as much in your favor. And so how you do that is you need to put plants that complement each other. So look, if your main goal here is to grow bananas, every plant in there needs to be aligned around growing bananas, and they all need to be attracting the right types of bugs that are in there, the right type of soil, the right type of oxygen levels. They all need to be based around that. And if you don't have that, if you're trying to grow bananas and you have like a sector of tomatoes over here that are releasing like different oxygen levels and need different temperatures, and you have this over here, the greenhouse starts to kind of like go in a negative vortex. It starts to kill itself. It starts to cannibalize itself. And this is exactly what happens when you don't have a base code for your company. And then you hire people that aren't structured around the base code. There are all sorts of different companies, and there are some people that will work at some companies that will do amazing. For example, if you took a person from Apple and put them into Google, they probably wouldn't do too well. Or if you put a person from SpaceX into Google, they might not work so well. Very different environments. If you put a person from Oracle, Larry Ellison's company, into Zappos, completely would not work. But you can have all sorts of different companies. For example, Oracle is very like sell, get everything in. And then Zappos is very like friend, talk to a customer on the phone for 8 hours straight. Both of them work, but you can't have conflicting people in there. And what happened in Lucasfilm is every employee, let's look at their leaders. You got Bob Iger, wants to make as much money from Star Wars as possible. Kathleen Kennedy wants to put identity politics into it. You have Filoni, who wants to do the old vision and respect a lot of the old values of stuff going on in there. You have J.J. Abrams, who's trying to I don't even know. He frustrates me because he's a great director, but he also just clones movies. And then you have Rian Johnson, who's trying to like make Breaking Bad out of it. So like you have these people of so many different things. And then you have like some people who are all about the fans. You have some people that don't care about the fans at all. There's no aligning vision right here. And if there's an aligning vision, let's say the aligning vision right here is we put fans first. That is the number one thing. Then a few of these people will just go immediately. If the thing was based around values, it was based around values only, then these people right here, like Bob Iger right there, maybe wouldn't be in the mix. All right, maybe if it was based around values of the old movie, you might have just kept J.J. Abrams and David Filoni. But there's so many people who have completely different values, and there's no unifying culture. It's like they have a company where everyone's speaking a different language. I'm sure you have staff there. They want to see nothing more than a Luke Skywalker movie, and you have staff like Rian Johnson who want to make a new trilogy and put identity politics first, which I'm not saying for or against it. I'm not going to take a position on what they should and what they shouldn't do in this video. I've done enough of that. I'm saying that you can't have that because they're going in 6 different directions. Here's the 8 different directions all these people are trying to go. And what you have is this company is just, and what's happening is you just end up with a dog turd. You end up, what's happened is when you don't have value set, you end up at the worst possible point of each value. Because they were trying to respect the old movies, but they're also trying to do identity politics at the same time and inject and focus on that first, they ended up nowhere, and they ended up with bad characters that really hurt identity politics. Like, Rey is not doing a favor for the lead female role. Does not, but they also ended up pissing off every single fan by not respecting it. Because they're trying to do a money grab, but they're also trying to change the system at the same exact time, what's happening is they end up with a thing that isn't what people wanted and is also trying to grab money at the same time. It's the disaster of disasters. And maybe they can turn around. That's not what this video is about. This video is about you and your company. You have to go out there and you have to outline your principles. For example, I have very specific principles that define my source code now that I didn't have before. So for example, health before all else, because if I don't have good health, I can't focus. I can't pull a 16-hour day with a lot of energy. Okay? What I have principles right now is extreme time management. All right? And in one focus. I only focus on one thing at a time. Everything has to align to my main goal. And those are just a few of my little principles right there. Okay? Another thing I have right here is brutal self-awareness. I routinely have my employees that know me the best tell me every worst thing about me. I have my girlfriend do that. I constantly try and dig and find all the horrible things about myself and call myself out on them. Those are a few things that I constantly go back on. Okay, those are a few things. That's a default source code. You must have a source code of your own. If you don't have a board like this for your own personal life, you don't have a clear direction, you don't have a clear goal, you don't have anything. You don't have anything. And in a company, it's a little bit different. You're trying to build something that unifies people. You're trying to build the greenhouse rules. And if I can get back to my freaking browser. And so when you're building this greenhouse, there has to be things that the greenhouse focuses on, and there has to be things that it will never focus on. There has to be things that it's extremely good at, and there has to be things that it's not ever going to be good at. And it has to be aligned around one point. So why does your greenhouse exist? If there's 2 or 3 different things, there needs to be one reason why. All right, what is the problem it's trying to solve? If you're trying to solve 6 problems at once, like that was the biggest mistake I made at Market Hero in the beginning, it's never going to work. You have to have one big problem, and then you have to have one big mission, one big vision of what you want your company to do, and you need to have values that work as a source code for every single decision that's made at the company, because if you have 5 employees and they don't have a source code to go back to, they're going to end up all over the place. They're going to end up all over the place. When I'm in Slack talking to my company, what I do is when we're making decisions, I just slap, I'm honestly, my entire job at Market Hero, a lot of times, is just spamming this board. Whenever making decisions, just, no, that's like my job. That's what I do. And that's why, because if I get the right people around the right source code, and I get them behaving around these values, the greenhouse is going to grow. That's the only thing a CEO should do, besides generating money and being an overall cool dude like myself. But look, that's the most important part. If you don't have this, the greenhouse starts decombobulating itself. And unlike Lucasfilms, you're not going to start with $20 billion in the war chest. You're just going to die. And this applies even if you have a small company of 1 to 3 employees. What's going to happen right here is if you don't hire people based on the source code, you're going to have, trust me, I've seen such mega turds come into my companies when they were small because I didn't have these values as source codes. And because of that, their values were out of whack. Like some of them valued money instead of customers. And that could be fine if the whole company was based around valuing money, but it was out of whack. It was out of whack. And then some of them valued, like, spending time with their family and friends and, like, a happy-go-lucky culture. And then some of them are like, I'm going to work till 1 a.m. and I never stop. And that's really bad because those employees don't work well together. And there's so many different things that counteract each other. And so if you're doing that, if you have 3 partners who all have 3 different whys and 3 different goals, and then 3 different visions for the company, and they have different value sets, you're going to end up like Lucasfilms with Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the directors right there. And then you're going to be hiring people that don't align with your values. For example, Kathleen Kennedy, the value was like identity politics, and then Bob Iger was making as much money. So J.J. Abrams gets hired, but then they hire these other directors that don't fit her bill, and so they get fired. And so that's a disaster for the expensiveness of hiring someone and then firing them is out of control. I can only imagine how many millions and zillions of dollars they lost firing and hiring directors. It's out of control. And then when you have this, the staff is making so many contradictory decisions. There's no base code. For example, when you saw a lot of or if you look at, let's say, the big disaster at Lucasfilms is their tug of war between identity politics and making good movies. And so if you look at like a lot of their employees who are making fun of fans, what is the goal here? Is the goal here identity politics? Is the goal here to make as much money as possible? Is the goal here fans first? Is the goal here us first? And there's no defining value. There's no value right there. And so what happened right here? Well, some of the employees are pushing identity politics, but then that hurts other employees. But then that hurts money. And then it hurts the fans. And so where you end up is right here, and this is the nastiest place to be. Heck, if you're going to go identity politics, you better go all the way there so you can isolate as many people that want to put culture and politics first in the movies. And you need to cut this out. You can't go for money first. You can't go for the fans. You can't go, if you want to do this right here, you can go for us and identity politics. You can't go for both of these. Your company can't do all these things. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my synopsis. This is my post-mortem of what I think is one of the greatest business disasters of the last decade that is completely self-inflicted. There's a lot of companies that have made bigger mess-ups than this, but you could look at some big pharma companies and their values were make as much money as possible, and it destroyed the company because they were so aligned to that value that they just went all in on it. And they made a lot of money in the process, so they got it there. But Lucasfilms doesn't have a clear culture and it doesn't have a clear value. And I really hope, for their sake, that they get this together, because I'd like to see good movies in the future, but that's here or there, because I don't watch movies, I don't watch TV. That has nothing to do with my goals. That's one of my principles. So that's what you need to do, is in this video, look at your company, look at your principles, and find out where you're pulling this off. Because for the longest time, the thing that held me off the most was, I don't think I can go back right here, is 4 different terms, 4 different ties. Do I want to become famous? Do I want to build a $200 million company? Do I want to have a crazy lifestyle? Do I want to relax and spend time and have fun? All these things are all contradictory. All these things are too contradictory. So what here, I'm actually dead set on becoming a billionaire. So everything I do is aligned around that. I don't do these things. And so that's why my company's doubled, I believe, in the past 60 days, almost. And so if you want to see those type of results in your life, you can't be a Lucasfilms. You have to be a SpaceX, which is just dead set. The only thing they care about is getting to Mars and making cool stuff. They don't care about the financials. Or be an Amazon. That's a much better example. If you look at Amazon, always. And then they have a few other values like cheapness and stuff like that. But that is it. That is all they do. They don't look at their financials. They don't look at anything. They just delight the customer. Go watch a Jeff Bezos interview. It's that's the biggest indicator of how a good company culture works. Because of that, they have 500,000 employees who are all going in the same exact direction. So do that in your life, or don't do it and end up committing business seppuku and being reviewed in one of my business post-mortem videos. Let me know in the comments section below if you guys like these business post-mortem videos, and I'll make them more often. I'll catch you later.